Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. For me in California, it's good morning. I am really, really happy to be bringing you this class today. It's a topic that comes up in a lot of my live classes, so I thought we could devote a whole webinar to it just so there's more clarity, because not everybody knows what it is. So, what it is, a bottom-up practice. I am a practitioner that uses bottom-up approaches and methods for my self-care in particular, but also my work with clients, especially with reflexology and Reiki. So in this class today, we will explore what is meant by a bottom-up practice, what it is. We will talk about some of the components that make up that practice, right? What needs to be present for it to even be considered a bottom-up practice? We will notice how it's different from a top-down. We will define what a top-down practice is. And then we can talk a little bit about why and in what scenarios and for what people a bottom-up practice would really benefit, right? Or, acknowledging that within ourselves. When would it benefit me? And then finally, we'll end with some self-care techniques and some techniques you could also use for care for clients. So let's see, let's begin at the beginning. The simplest way to describe a bottom-up practice is it places the body at the center of the healing process, right? It acknowledges the body like it almost seems obvious, the body like the origin, right? It is the way in, right? So instead of igniting thoughts and cognition and ideas and accessing memories and trying to figure it out, right? As quick digression, I always know that I'm outside myself if I'm trying to figure it out. So this is releasing that, that way of thinking, being, releasing, figuring it out, and then becoming more body-centric, right? So we go within. So a bottom-up practice would also be highly sensorial, right? It is based on sensory data and experiences, right? Which we'll talk about in a little bit too, because that has to do with the nervous system and how we experience everything. We experience everything at first sensorially. Some examples of a bottom-up practice are, or approaches are, if we're thinking movement, dance, for sure, martial arts, yoga, some therapies that are included or considered bottom-up are things like somatic experiencing. If you've heard about that, that was created by Peter Levine. IFS, internal family systems. Another one would be EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Say that 10 times fast. And these things, I began as a dancer. It was my first career. And to this day, many years later, especially now, actually, in a very different way, it is more integral to my healing journey and healing process. And I'd say even definitely expression, but also liberation from my held trauma, my held pain, right? So if I'm somebody, my survival mechanism is to freeze, right? Just to kind of freeze in action, let something occur, step back, right? Slightly dissociate, right? Come back here. So when I move, I free myself of the very frozen nature that I go to survive, if that makes sense. It doesn't serve me, right? I want to breathe. I want to be free. I want to move. And I think in many ways it's not by accident, right? That these things find us, right? I started as a dancer, but it was like my mother was a dancer. My grandmother was a dancer. Like it was in my blood. There was something there for all of us that really, well, I can only speak for myself. For me, provides tremendous healing Over the years, I have discovered that practices such as reflexology and Reiki, also cranial-sacral therapy, cranio-sacral therapy, for instance, are integral in calming and nurturing the central nervous system, right? The very system that is disrupted when people experience trauma or anything that disrupts their inner body or outer body. Right. So a bottom-up practice, let's just like define it a little bit more. Let's go in a little deeper. So a bottom-up practice is one that works literally from the bottom up, right? So the bottom up would be the body. Think about up being the head. So the body is bottom. The body is, it's like the sensory experience we have, the emotions within and without, were initially based on sensorial experiences. So you could think of it like gut feelings, right? This is where we feel our intuition, right? We get a feeling that something is off, something is not right, right? We can tap into that place, this inner knowing. It's that information. It's that information that we receive that is delivered upward from the gut, right? This enteric nervous system, our gut brain, right? And we know approximately 80% of information taken in from the outside and within as well, taken in, first arrives at the level of our gut, and then it's sent upward, right, to the head brain for further processing and assessment, right? Those reality checks, right? It's like, is this a hose or a snake, right? So my go-to is it's always a snake. There's never any hoses. Hoses don't exist for me. There's snakes everywhere, right? So that is because, and I know this, and I've been doing work for a long time, so I acknowledge this part of myself, and I know how to pause and to be present in reality long enough to know it's not a snake, but it's my initial thing. Yeah. I like that, chat. Yes. Right. So, but also that's just part of the process as we get to know ourselves. We get to know ourselves. And once we know ourselves, then we know we can learn how to better be in the world, right? And to better be with the reality that is the human experience, right? What am I really seeing? Perception. I just had something last night, an occurrence happened last night where somebody said something and it triggered me. And right away, I went to saying something that was very important. It was like a very strong boundary I had to set. And, maybe an hour passed and we're in the same space. And I said, I don't feel good. Having said, even though it was very nice, I wasn't mean or anything, but I said something that just was like, I didn't have to say it. I didn't have to like put this person in their place, right? I didn't have to do that. And so after like an hour, I was like, we're all here. We're all connected. There doesn't need to be this tension, right? Let me lighten this load. And so I went over and I said, hey, I'm sorry. It's hard to be, I play pool. It's hard to be a woman playing pool sometimes. And people give it a lot of advice. You're really kind. Sorry, I jumped to that. And boy, it was like the universe like shone, like there was all this light that came in, and he said something very kind and provided more clarity. And then I woke up this morning. And I for whatever reason, after a good night's sleep, I was like, oh my gosh, he actually wasn't giving me advice. He was telling me that the last ball was a foul ball. This might not mean anything to you guys, but he was actually just giving me information. He wasn't even giving me advice, but it was my go-to because I'm so used to, right? My perception of the outer world and what people do in certain environments, I know what happens. And so because I know so much, I react instead of actually knowing. Now I know that about myself. So I know myself. I'm going to get to pause. And hopefully longer than I did last night, right? I didn't pause long enough to recognize, what is this person saying? What are all the pieces of information? Not my go-to based on my past stuff, if that makes sense. It was a hose, not a snake. A bottom-up practice also It also, yes, it empowers the person, right? It empowers the person who's doing the bottom up practice. It empowers them to tap into their own body, right? With a greater capacity to tap into their, there's a word that everybody's bringing up nowadays, interoception, right? Interoception is internal processes, our ability to technically it's defined as our ability to feel into physiological processes like digestion, right? Our heart rate, right? But it can be very, very subtle. Things that might be a little easier to access as far as interoception goes. It's Interoception, CEPTION, is I'm hungry. Oh, I'm thirsty, right? That's a kind of inner awareness. But emotional interoception, I like this concept of how do I go in and tap in? How do I feel, right? How do I actually feel? And this can be quite difficult, again, for people who come from all kinds of places, right? If you had asked me 20 years ago, hey, how was your weekend? Or how are you feeling today? I might get a little like, why? Why are you asking? I don't know, because I couldn't remember. I didn't have access to a certain part of my experience. I wasn't holding on. I wasn't fully present in moments that would give me access to short-term memories. And there were good reasons for that. Today, you could ask me how I am, and I'll tap in and I'll think and I'll give you an answer. But 20 years ago, I didn't know how to do that, right? Or however long ago, around there. So interoception, emotional right? How am I feeling? In a bottom-up approach, or in many bottom-up approaches anyway, we don't need to talk, actually, right? We certainly don't need to relive any memories, or pain. I'm not a fan of re-traumatization in order to heal. It's just, it doesn't resonate with me. Part of my training comes from also teachers and people who also don't believe in this. So instead, in my practice, when I think of a bottom-up approach, it's like you're just free to simply feel as you are now. And an approach like reflexology or Reiki, it would be like, how are you feeling today? Well, my back hurts, my belly's gurgling, I'm tired, I'm restless, right? It's like a way to access pain within ourselves can actually not be through the childhood stories and the stuff that we want to dredge up because we think if we say it again and again and again, it will somehow go away. But instead, through looking at what is occurring today, my back today, what are my triggers today? What are my sensations today? Where is my breath today? What is my body saying now today, right? So in reflexology and in Reiki, I ask, and if you've been in my classes, especially my live ones, although I do it sometimes online too, we ask very simple questions, right? If you've done a long distance Reiki session with me, if you've done an in-person, right, Reiki session or reflexology session with me, you know that I ask, how is your outer body? How's your body? And then I ask, how's your inner body? Right? And someone goes, what's my inner body? How's your digestion? Do you get any headaches? How'd you sleep last night? What's going on inside? Right? Then I ask, how's your emotional body? How's your heart? How do you feel today? Right? And then we end with, I guess kind of, it could be, if we're sticking with bodies, it could be, how's your head body? What do you want to give attention to today? What do you want to focus on today? Right? That's today. So we're not going back. Yeah. And actually it makes sense, right? Because trauma, when you think about something that relives, it's living in us today. So let's just deal with today. Let's see where we are today and how we can help heal that. Now, a top-down practice or approach or method or therapy is one that utilizes more like talking, ideas, verbal outpour, interpretation, assessment, something like this, cognition, psychoanalysis, psychotherapy. There are practices that are talk therapy that utilize certain kind of bottom-up approaches, but are considered still top-down. And that's something like CBT, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy. Um, this one often, this will be something that someone who's struggling with addiction or behavioral issues or certain trauma, this might be something they go to. And CBT, they might do things like writing, pausing, right? Playing out certain scenarios, right? Preparation for future exposure to certain scenarios, triggering events, something like this. So you're using your mind, but you're also using sensorial data, we'll say. So the idea in a top-down practice is that talking and analyzing and processing, the client gets to move from, I guess we could say it like the client gets to move from a place of kind of chaos or unknowingness to a place of order and understanding, I would say. Yeah. Now, I become curious about this because I am curious. Can one move between one part of the brain and another, right? The question becomes, can the client move, for instance, from the limbic brain, right, to the frontal cortex, right? From the part of the brain that is like survival, right? Am I in danger right now, to the part of the brain that says no, right? Can I move from a place of, that's a snake, to that's a hose. It's okay, that's a hose. How do I make that jump? How do I, or is there another in between? Is there a place to reside where both are possible? There's a lot of these are the things I think about, right? But can we, right? Can we move? And if you know, tell me, right? Can we move from the right brain to the left? Now, there are exercises and methods I employ and use that I feel are moving from right to left, from limbic to frontal, right? Just by virtue of what I'm doing with my hands, with my breath, etc. But further studies are necessary. Further, what is it? Functional MRI, right? We want to be able to look at the brain during these things. That's what we have to do. So talk therapy, it helps a lot of people, and there are people that it doesn't work for, and vice versa. So we want to be sure we're aware of that. So for me, for instance, talk therapy, of the variety, old school talk therapy doesn't work, right? Because of the type of pain, the type of trauma that I come from, that I've experienced. I need a more integrative, body-centric approach, right? To touch the wounds I bear. We need both, like I said, but we're all different. We're the different and the same. But yeah, some people have great success with talk therapy, but it can be complicated, especially for those who come from a certain type of emotional types of pain, or trauma or neglect, right? There's certain ways in which the person has had to survive that make it so just simply talking about it, I could talk all day and I don't get anywhere, right? There's certain other means by which I have to tap into my body and be here now in order to arrive and be present on this earth and start to really heal. Okay. So what else? Let's see. I'm gonna check my notes here. See where we are. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Let me talk about this because not everybody maybe has been in all my classes. So we'll talk about this idea of the sensorial experience first, right? Everything happens sensorially. If you've been in my classes, you've heard me say this a lot of times. So we break down our external environment and our internal process. Every single thing that happens on the outside, in order for it to be experienced, has to occur, has to be processed internally, right? So we experience the world via our senses. We know this, right? That means what comes in perhaps can best be released via that same route, right? That same method, as it were, or even expressing through action perhaps that which was unable to be expressed in the moment, right? When we experience something difficult or devastating, our body is going to jump most often to a survival mode, right? Where we're going to like fight, flight, freeze, faint, flop, we're going to do something that just collapses ourselves in some kind of way. And we need to release that energy, right? So that energy that came, or that experience that came from the outside, that we processed internally via our central nervous system, my spinal cord, my brain, processed, and then a response was given, right? A sensorial experience was had. How can I, if I have blocks and behavioral issues and dis-eases, how can I release that held tension in my body? So I'll use this as an example. Some years ago, I don't remember exactly when, I think it was 2006, 2007, something like that. I was at the time, I was in a singing group and we were on tour. We were in a tour bus. It was night. And suddenly we were hit from behind by a semi. And I remember it like it was yesterday. All right. That is something I do remember. And I remember I became hyper aware and I started to really kind of take care, right? We were all brought outside the bus. And what I was aware of in the moment and today is, and in moments of high tension or trauma, for me anyway, things become hyper real. Things become super duper clear and even slow down a little bit, but it's that clear. There were some of us that were like that. You could see who we were. We were hyper organized. We were talking, we were calming people down. We were organizing people in a line to the left, to the right. Are you in pain? This sort of thing. And then there were those others who were crying, or they were frozen in terror. They didn't know what to think or, do. Now, because I'm somebody who gets into like hyper active, going to resolve the problem mode, I have to know that about myself, because then that means that I haven't fully experienced what just happened, right? I need to release, I need to cry, I need to process, I need to shake it out, right? That's the difference between animals and humans, right? Animals, when they survive, they celebrate, they dance, they shake it off, and then they run, right? We don't do that necessarily as human beings. If you do, good, right? We have to know that if something is being held in our body, we have to shake it out. Another example of that would be Peter Levine, who I brought up earlier with Somatic Experiencing. He wrote a book called Waking the Tiger, and many years ago. And he has a video, which you could see online, where he's working with a guy named Ray, a Marine veteran, and he is he's suffering from PTSD, Tourette's, and some other things. And I'll just talk about this one element of the video. He takes him through a process where he asks him, what happened, and what happened. He goes, I froze. I wasn't able to fight back. And he goes, okay, well, we're going to fight back then. And he has him, and please watch the video because this is secondhand. And I'll post it on the group so you guys can watch it. It's about a half hour. And he has me, because you're going to throw that punch. You're going to fight back. But you're going to do it in slow motion. And there'll be 3 of us guys here to kind of hold you. Right. And he gets to throw that punch that he wanted to throw in that moment, that he wanted to fight back in the moment, but he was unable to. He wasn't able to. And in so doing, there was a release that occurred because he requited the very thing that really needed to happen in that moment, right? Which was to fight. Okay. I think I should pause here. Are there any questions? You could type in the chat, or you can ask. Any questions, any ideas, anything that comes to mind about anything I've said so far? Okay. Oh, Oh yeah, internal family systems, IFS. Yeah, Dick Schwartz. So, or Richard Schwartz. If you don't know who he is, that's something else. I'll put together a little something to put in our Facebook group. I'll put a little something so you can both the video I was mentioning and a little something about. I could also just put his website, but something a little bit about him. So when we're looking at a bottom-up approach, we're looking at something from the inside out, right? Internal family systems. He's asking the client to go within and identify what he calls parts. Everybody has these different parts of self, right? There's the guilty part of self, there's the addictive part of self, there's the resilient part of self. There's all these different parts, right? So he has somebody go in and begin to commune with those parts. So it's a very internal, sensorial, inside, feeling-based experience that the client would go through or the patient goes through. Yeah, it's kind of both. Exactly. Right. You know, it's what, so this is what's interesting. Okay. Yes. So top down is talk, right? That's the easiest way to put it. Top down is like talk therapy, but also because we're tapping into that sensorial experience and how you feel and having these kind of conversations within, it's not active. It's a different part of the body mind connection. It's not just like, this is what happens. This is what happens to me. If I do X, Y, and Z, then it will get better. It's not that kind of process. You're doing it differently. And so this would be an example of how writing and talking can be top down or bottom up, right? So something like the talking is an example is what we just talked about, right? Are you talking from a figuring it out kind of place, assessing, accessing the memories, right? And trying to figure out how to plan ahead? Or are you tapping into your sense body? Are you going inside to have conversations? And actually, and I close my eyes as I do it, right? This idea that when we go inside, we're actually tapping into another kind of wave, another way of thinking, right? If you think about another way to think about this would be like the brain waves, right? So like in talk therapy, that's like beta, active thinking. I am thinking, the beta brain waves, right? Or rhythms, you could call it. So that would be beta, right? Active thinking. Oftentimes with bottom-up approaches, you're getting into more of a theta state or even an alpha state. I would say that IFS is more like an alpha state. It's like a relaxed focus, or also CMR. That's another way, like a relaxed thought, a way of like being with the body where you're thinking, feeling, but you're in a relaxed state. So there's a variety, right? We have beta, SMR, we have alpha, theta, and delta, right? Delta is like sleep, internal world. In reflexology and Reiki, oftentimes what happens is you're in those either theta or delta, right? You're either drowsy, kind of about to fall asleep, sleepy, but not quite asleep, in between awake and asleep, or you fall asleep. For me, this is where a lot of the healing process takes place, right? This is where our parasympathetic nervous system kicks in, rest and digest. This is why I woke up today and it was like, oh my God, that's what happened. I had clarity of thought because I went to sleep, right? I didn't have clarity of thought in the moment when I was in active thinking, beta, and also survival mode based on what he said that triggered me, right? I rested and I had more accessibility to actual reality and what was really going on. So that's another way to think of it. And also with writing, another way in is, it could be top down or bottom up, depending on how you write. So you who just wrote this question. Yeah. So this is, yeah, totally. Okay. Yeah. So, because you're a writer, we're all writers, but it could be bottom up or top down. So it's interesting to consider, how do I write? Right. So depending on how you write would determine if you are a top down or a bottom up kind of person, right? So do you organize? Do you construct an outline, right? Maybe you lay out the whole format, and then you proceed, right, with great order. Or do you feel and go more like stream of consciousness? right? Are there like this? We're all different. There are parts of the brain that light up that are dark based on a million trillion little things. The very idea for me of doing an outline is exhausting, very difficult, unbearable, confining, right? I cannot do it. I am not a top-down writer. But if I get into a relaxed state and I really tap into like one word and what I'm trying to communicate, then it flows. It also, another way would be as if you were doing stream of consciousness. That would be bottom up. Penna Baker is somebody who did, he has a study, I think it's still up on PubMed, where he took, it was at Stanford University, and he took two sets of groups of people, one who was writing down all of their emotional, what was going on within them, and other people that were just writing. And there's a significant difference between those for those who were writing down something that really needed to be articulated, but they would never share with anybody, but it was important stuff. There was actually a change in their blood pressure. It lowered. And then that lasted for a certain number of weeks, I believe. I want to say 3 weeks, but don't quote me on that. That's just my memory in this second in time. But interesting to kind of, again, know thyself. Anything else? Okay. Really, really good. Yay. All right. So I think we should go into some self-care stuff. Let me see if there's any other little notes I want to say. Yeah, all the same stuff, right? Know yourself. Know yourself. What resonates for you? Yeah, safety is top priority. Yeah, so that's the other thing too. Like, I love dance. Obviously I love reflexology, energy work. I love breath work. I love tactile, I like that kind of experience. So that's the way I like to experience my life and my healing process. But not everybody's like that. And I can say I love dance. I will not say to somebody, you should dance, it's going to free you, because I don't know that that's going to free them, right? There are some people that might say, oh my God, ecstatic dance has been so liberating. I go to these socials where there's like 100 people in a room just doing their dance, and I think that sounds awful, right? Like, because I have a certain amount of anxiety, right, about being around too many people, right? So if that's you, I'm using this as an example, if that's you, it might not be advantageous for you to go to some dance event or festival. It might be better to be at home alone with your favorite little bit of music and just gently see what it's like to sway, or to move your shoulders or your fingertips, to look from side to side, right? To do very basic things. It's everybody's so different. Also to say, with reflexology, if I receive a reflexology session or a Reiki session or body work, etc., I will close my eyes and I am ready to receive. I believe in those practices and how it helps me. But there are some people that if you ask them to close their eyes, that is not their safe place. Also, relaxing and feeling safe around somebody else might be difficult for some people. Right. So there are going to be moments and people for which a bottom-up practice, we have to ask all the right questions. We have to know ourselves, and we have to ask questions of other people to find out what's right for them, because what's right for me is not going to be necessarily right for you. Okay, so let's get into some self-care tools, and then we'll close for the morning, afternoon. Okay. I'm going to mention some stuff I do for self-care and things for client care. So first, with self-care, if you've ever read The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, I read it years ago. I have it on my bookshelf. It's by Millman. Millman? Yes. Millman. Wrote a few books. One of them is The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. And I remember reading it and being struck by this moment that the master said to his student, you must, I'm paraphrasing, this is not even paraphrasing, I read it so many years ago, but it's stuck. You have to massage every single part of the body until there is no pain. Think about that. Like there's a part of your leg where like, oh, that hurts. And you could rub it and rub it and rub it, maybe a whole inch of it, and it's still really painful. He's instructing him to massage out every part of the body that is clogged or locked by whatever. In my brain, I think energy, memory, anxiety, toxins, tissue built up, just all of that. What would it be like? How long would it take to massage every single inch of my body? So what I have done, and I continue to do, and I've been doing it a lot lately because I'm on a mission to be very clean and healthy right now. It's like it's the train I'm on. I am doing that with just every day, little by little, right? And a couple times a week, I go to a sauna and and in there with all that heat and sweat, and it's a wet sauna, and I go in and I get even deeper into the parts of my legs and my arms that have been held, right? Or that have some kind of buildup, it feels like, right? So I get to work that out. So that's one of the things I will do in order to help release, right? Another thing, and these are all of these methods, yes, we could call them a bottom-up approach for sure. But they're all with the intention of helping to ease the person's mind, right? To soften one's body, right? To get someone in a state of greater relaxation, so we're not as charged, right? That's the whole point, right? If we're going, whether we're going to talk therapy, a top-down approach or a bottom-up, we're going because something needs to release, right? We're feeling stressed out. We just want to calm down. Maybe we got a diagnosis or something's, going on within our gut, and we need some release there. So all of these things are with that intention too. Another one, which is one of my favorite, is the palming of the eyes, where you take your palms and the base of the hand. You can do it like this, where you just cup it and you place it over both eyes. In this way, you're blocking out all the light and it's complete darkness. What I like to do instead is I'll take the bottom of my hand and I actually literally like to feel it on my eyelids like this. So this part of my body, this is actually where my eye is, and I could feel a slight pressure from my hand. I have my elbows on my desk because I'm often at this desk, and I just rest here. I highly, highly recommend setting an alarm that goes off 3 times a day. If you work, 5 to 8 hours a day, let it go off 3 times a day, or on any day, even on days that you're not working. If you work more than 8 hours a day, I would recommend 5, setting 5 alarms. And just know the minute that alarm goes off, you're like, it's palming the eyes time, and it's only a minute. You just go and you can set it for a minute because we have so much work to do. That's fine. And you just go for 1 whole minute like this. And then you resume with work and you do your thing. It goes off in another 3 hours. It's like 3 minutes of your day or 5 minutes of your day. And for me, it really helps with my work. Work is better. The more I do that, the better my work is. If I go, I think I'm getting so much done, but the work isn't as good. If I stop, if I become curious, if I take a break, if I stand up, if I palm my eyes, all of this makes my work better. And my work and my life are one, in a good way. Another thing you can do, and this is really, this is something that happens automatically sometimes during a session of Reiki or reflexology, where as I'm giving a session, the client will just like kind of have a little shake. I call them shakes and shimmies, right? They like just shake. It's like held energy that you no longer need being kicked off, or like when you're about to go to sleep at night and you're like, you do that whole thing. It's the same thing, right? That held, whatever's being held is released. These are great. I love the shakes and shimmies. I was mentioning earlier about animals, right? You could see it. You could go on YouTube and see the polar bears and the deer and all this doing their little celebration dances and their shakes. You could see it in a cat. I have 2 kitties. They're always shaking. If I pet them too much, they're like, oh, they shake me off, right? We have to shake off that stuff too, or we get to. So shake and shimmy, do it on purpose, or if you have time to lie down and just feel yourself moving into another state, right? Going towards a theta or a delta state where you can just begin to feel those shakes and shimmies. And also, you know, I will notice in my body, I tend to shake in a certain direction, right? There's a certain thing that my one arm will do. If there's a certain type of scenario or energy in my life or memory or whatever, there's a certain type of way my body will release that energy. This is similar to, you know, and I've talked about this before. I don't remember. It's in one of my, it's in the Something New Every Day book that I wrote. I don't remember where or which one, but it's that, right? Something's going on, and it's almost like we're staring into one area and just reliving what I could have said, what I could have said, what I could have said, what they did, what they said, what was done to me, what was done to me, what was done to me. And the best thing you could do is just change your gaze. Just look in the other direction, right? EMDR is really powerful in this place too. And that's actually a really, that's a good thing to know, especially if you're a practitioner and you don't do it or you're not certified to do it, to know people, practitioners that do it in your area. So if there's someone who comes to you that you think might benefit from that practice, you know, someone you can recommend them to. So shakes and shimmies, right? Changing the direction of where your gaze is, right? And again, know thyself. Notice whenever you're having a funky thought about someone or something and you're looking in a certain direction, start to pay attention to the direction you're looking. I don't guarantee it, but for me, it is always the same direction. And what liberates me is always the opposite. Okay. Another thing you can do is sway, right? If you don't want to like shake it out. I mean, highly recommend turning on your favorite song, like shake and shimmy. That's another alarm you could set. So you can shake and shimmy during your day. But sway, 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 right? I find when I give energy sessions, or if I'm doing certain kind of intuitive work, I will I'll notice that I'm swaying to and from. You'll see this actually in certain spiritual practices, right? Where people will be actually swaying on purpose or by default. For me, it's by default. It just starts to happen to my body in the moments where I am receiving and giving. And so it can be this kind of sway, but also for me, that's kind of in connection to higher power. But there could also be like a sway like this, like a sway back and forth. This is something I've noticed in myself, gets me into gets me out of my brain, into my body, and is something I will often do if I am observing an experience, and it gets me really, really relaxed. Right? Instead of any kind of holding pattern that I might be doing, I just kind of gently sway. And I give myself over to the moment, to the experience, to the person, to the listening. Another thing you can do is something I call prayer points. I call them prayer points because I'm taking my prayer position. In Reiki, we call this gasho. I'm taking my prayer position and I bring it at the level of all my chakras. I call them points because I'm hitting points on my physical body and outer body, right? So prayer points would be here, here. So I just did crown chakra. This is pineal gland, third eye, my throat, my heart. From heart, these are all facing up, fingertips up. The minute I do heart, after that, I move down into my solar plexus and I go like this, out. So I'm actually going like this, prayer points like this. So I start up and I'm moving down. So I'm up, 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 out, down, down, down. So when I go into those lower chakras, I'm literally moving my hands into a position. And once my elbows are by my sides, those fingertips can face directly to the earth, right? They go directly down. So I'm literally going from here to out to all the way down. You can't see it, but it goes all the way down. If you were sitting in a position and doing this for your lower chakras, the sacral and the root, your fingers will be face down. And so you can do that just simply in meditation. You could do it with an intention at the level of the chakras, if you know what those are. If not, just having them be, like I said, prayer points, places that you are igniting and acknowledging and sending a certain energy to between the crown and the root chakras. And lastly, what I do is the HPA axis. So again, comes up a lot in my work. It's the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. And I always see it like an 8, right? This loop, and it is a loop. It's a loop because when a stressful situation is coming up, that hypothalamus, which is in your brain, tells the pituitary to tell the adrenals to produce cortisol and epinephrine, right? Adrenaline, let's get things going. Now that it's a loop because it can be going again and again and again. Produce adrenaline, produce epinephrine, produce cortisol, right? Let's get things going. This kind of energy, right? I feel like for many years, definitely when I was living in New York and working a lot, it was like I was constantly in fight or flight mode. Even if I didn't even realize it, I was always in sympathetic mode. It was very hard to get me to rest and digest. I was always in like fight, flight, gotta do, gotta be somebody, right? I'm no longer interested in that. But this HPA axis, when we give attention to it from a reflexology perspective, we're able, and I'll show you on the hands and then I'll show you in the feet, for people who are clients, who have clients, is we're sending the message there for greater blood flow. We're sending the message there to relax. We're sending the message there, it's okay. Maybe let's interrupt this loop. Let's interrupt this stress pattern. Okay. So how you do it in your own hands is you take your fingertip, this is my pointer finger, right hand, to my left thumb. I place it at the center, very center of the swirl or the dot where a fingerprint is. I place it right at the center and I hold the backside. And I just hold and count for 5 seconds. I then can do a rocking. We call this a tilting or a press and rock. I'm rocking up, right? So I'm going into the hypothalamus, right? The structures in the brain, it's going to go hypothalamus and then thalamus, right? Hypo because it's below the thalamus, but it's rocking up into it from the pituitary and pineal gland area. Then, like the loop it is, I like to cross over to the other side. So I won't just work on one hand, right? I won't be doing that. Instead, I'm here, right? But it'll be in my lap because I'm really relaxed right there. And then I go with my other finger to the other side where my adrenal gland reflexology area is. And then I press and hold. This is called the thenar eminence. It's very developed in us nowadays with all of our computer and our phone work. Right at the center there, we hold the back side, we press in and relax. And again, it's in your lap. So you could do it with your thumb too, whatever's easiest. You just want to make sure you make contact with that area, that point. You press in and relax the hand you're working on. And you hold for 5. And then you do it to the other side. So now I get to go to the other thumb. And after that 5 seconds, rock, 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 I'm going to go to the other side here, right? Here, other side here, here, other side here, here, other side here. And you could do all fingers here, here, other side, here, here, other side. So what ends up happening is you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, which is very cool because we want to be able to be working kind of bilaterally, right, with the hemispheres. A very cool way to kind of to interrupt certain behaviors or ways of being within that occur at the level of the left and right hemispheres is actually to cross, right, to cross to the other side, cross to the other side, cross to the other side. So I'm a big fan of the crossing over. Okay, and then I'll show you in the feet too, and then we have to close because we're approaching the hour. And then we'll see if there's any questions, and I'll look at the chat too. So yeah, with a client, it would be the same thing, right? The big toe, just like the thumb, it's right at the center there. You press it and hold, and you rock up, rock up, rock up. And then you would go to the other foot. You go to the other foot and press and hold. And then you come, okay, let's hold them like this. And then you go here. And then the other hand comes here. You go here, other hand here. There's a way to do it once you start getting used to that looping action. This is something you would do at the start or the end of a session, especially if you're someone who works one foot and then the other. When you get to that hypothalamus, the HPA axis, you could either do it at the beginning, the middle, or the end. For me, the middle or the end is best. So I'm up here at the level of the hypothalamus pituitary. I cross over, and then I get to hold both sides. Then I transfer, I come up, rock, 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 hold both sides. This is going to be very good for those of you who have taken my trauma and addiction class, the live one, right? We do the heart holds. So you're really going to start to see, those of you who take my other classes, we do a lot of this crossing over and these energetic holds within the framework of the nervous system. Okay. This is all we have. This is our class. I want to know if there are any questions. I'm going to open the chat. I'm going to look at the chat. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Good, good, good. Mwah. And okay. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. Oh. Hi. Okay. Have a beautiful day. For those of you, well, you're gonna watch this. I'm gonna stop the recording and I'll post it so all of you who are unable to be here could watch this at a later date. And much love. If you have any questions when I post this, just ask below in our little group on Facebook. Okay. Much love. Bye.